Welcome to the first of the mini lectures on 7503 NSC Aviation Economics. My name's Barry Sutherland and I'll be doing this series of mini lectures throughout to give you an introduction to the course. Before I actually go into the first of the mini lectures, let me just say a few words about aviation economics. You're probably thinking, well, I've done some interesting courses in aviation, but I've got to do this one perhaps, and you probably think you're going to be bored with it. And I must admit, when I first was asked to redevelop this course, I thought to myself, well, economics is generally a dry subject. But aviation economics is a little bit different from all the rest. This is about the real world of aviation, the cut and thrust of airlines fighting for survival. And anything that we read today about airlines, we know they are really fighting for their survival. Every day they virtually fight a war. And so this subject, I think you'll find, will probably be one of the most interesting subjects that you will actually do in the course. I love teaching this subject, but students get back to me and they tell me after doing the course, I was expecting it to be boring, but I actually found it really interesting. And so it is with this course. This is a very applied course. We have to do some basic economic theory, and there are special parts of economics that are specific to aviation. But what you'll find is this is a really applied course. This one teaches you about the bottom line in running an aviation organisation and making sure that it makes a profit. First of all, at the start of all of our lectures throughout the course, what we'll be doing is starting with current aviation economic news. That is, what's going on in the world of aviation. And what we'll be showing you is where the theories that we do in the course and the principles apply to what's going on. And of course what I do is I ask the students, don't just let me supply all the information, why don't you put in things that you think are interesting, that not only will be of interest to you but also to the rest of the course, and help you see where this course actually applies to you. So let's take a look at mini lecture number one. What are we going to be doing? First of all, we're going to be looking at the economic related attributes of the airline industry. We're going to be looking at basic economic terms and theories used by the airline industry, and we'll be extending on these right throughout the course. We'll be explaining how strategic planning concepts. Now, you may have learnt these concepts before when you've done leadership, but it doesn't matter if you haven't, because we'll be doing a revision of a strategic planning model, and we'll be showing how they integrate with specialist airline planning concepts. We'll be describing the economic factors impacting on airline strategy formulation, and we'll be talking about the economic features that are unique to airline planning principles. So let's take a look. Whereabouts do we start? Why do we do aviation economics? Well, first of all, it provides a basis for key decision making in airlines. For example, the CEO of Virgin Australia, John Baghetti, says that whenever he travels on a Virgin Australia aircraft, as soon as he gets off the aircraft, he's after the latest information on how the airline is performing. That is, he's interested in the real-time metrics of how the airline is performing according to their plan. The next thing is it explains both the quantitative and the qualitative assessments made for planning in aviation environments. So aviation is one of those things because it deals with the human person, the passenger, the fickle passenger who might decide at a moment's notice to travel with another airline. It tells both those qualitative aspects and it shows the hard economic aspects through metrics that we're going to be studying. It explains why airlines succeed and fail. We'll be talking about this in case studies throughout the course. It demonstrates the unique features of the aviation industry, and aviation is different from all other areas. For example, you can make much more money selling soda water than you will in an airline. The 4 Australian banks make more money each year in profits than the whole of the world airline industry. So aviation is different, and it provides the link amongst the strategic management of the Griffith courses, the airline management, and the aviation leadership and communication. So this integrates with those other courses, and you'll see some of the principles cropping up from time to time. What are some of the features about airlines? Well, first of all, it's a service industry, and service industry is always going to be labour intensive, and sometimes that labour force is going to be unionised. Some people may have prejudices about unionised workforces, but what we'll see is that some airlines work quite well with unionisation, some don't. It's a very regulated industry because safety is a factor that people look for when they travel on an airline. It's highly competitive. Witness the cheap airfares that we're seeing now that weren't available 50 years ago in aviation when oil was a lot cheaper. It's often difficult to discriminate in. Everyone buys the aeroplanes from the same area, generates very high cash flow, lots of passengers. Look at an Airbus 380, the number of people that carries. But profit margins are small. We'll have a quick look at that soon. Customers are getting more and more knowledgeable. They can go online, they can find out through blogs as to where the best deals are. Different seat configurations for different airlines. It's seasonal. Load factors, and they're very often an aircraft can be flying and it's not making any profit at all because it doesn't have enough passengers on board. And of course the thing is, with the revenue that airlines make, some they get through doing the bookings themselves, some they get it from external travel agents. Also, airlines carry freight, and we'll be looking at freight particularly as a specialised part of the industry. Then we look at all the cost generators: fuel and maintenance, flight crew salaries, ground passenger services, marketing, all the ancillary support areas, finance, depreciation, taxes. We'll be covering all of those throughout the course to give you a really good knowledge of what it's like to run an airline. Some of the other things that we look at: government financial assistance, very high technological turnover. Look at the aircraft today compared to the aircraft of 20 years ago. They're like modern cars, don't need a lot of maintenance, they're a lot different. High labour and fuel expenses. Always people are looking for a competitive edge. There's a sensitivity to economic fluctuations. Witness the global financial crisis of 2009 and the impact on airlines. Very close government regulation, and also airlines are sometimes hit with, in strong competition, excess capacity and low marginal costs. Let's just take a look at a straight figure here. Here we can see that on a fare that is going to cost $224.40, that the cost of the airline is $218.46. That is, they make a $5.94 profit. Now, you'll make much more money selling perfumes. You'll make much more money selling drugs and pharmaceuticals. As I said, you'll make more money selling soda water, sugared soda water. So it's a really tough economic area, and we'll see how tough it is throughout the course. Yet airlines still do a good job. As I said before, Australia's 4 banks make more profits in a year than all the world airlines combined. Here we can see a graph, and we'll be looking at lots of graphs throughout the course. A graph is a picture. By the time you finish the course, you'll be able to look at the graph and you'll be able to tell the story about that graph. And it's showing that the airline profitability changes over time. And we'll be going into those features. Of course, the thing is, we can't study airline economics without doing some basic economic terms. And so we define economics, the allocation of scarce resources amongst alternatives to satisfy human needs. And every time you fly with an airline, you go online, you are obeying the world of economics. You're looking for the best deal. And so the airlines have got to decide what to produce, how they're going to do it, and who the customer is. And so scarcity is one of the big things that we come up against, and price always goes with scarcity, as we'll study throughout the course. We'll study the potential possibilities frontiers model, and we won't go into it deeply here except to say that with your disposable income, you sometimes might have to decide, how much will I spend on clothing, how much will I spend on food? Airlines are the same. For example, an airline such as Qantas decides how much are we going to put into international travel versus how much of our resources will go into that domestic travel. This is something that every airline comes up against. We'll be doing case studies, and one of the case studies we'll be looking at is Freddie Laker. Freddie Laker really pioneered low-cost travel across the Atlantic, and that concept spread to not only international travel but domestic travel as well. And Freddie started with a great idea, but Freddie in the end failed, and we'll be seeing how economic forces helped lead to his failure. We said that we're going to look at the strategic planning framework. This is something, if you've done leadership, you've studied already. And we'll study that framework very, very carefully. The impact of the internal environment within an airline or flying organisation, and the external environment, and how that affects the derivation, the vision, the mission, strategic goals, formulating strategy and implementing strategy. And first of all, this tells an airline as to what business it wants to be in. Is it going to be a legacy carrier? Is it going to be a low-cost carrier? All of these questions will be handled in this framework. But after that, we can then move and take a look at the real world of airlines. And for example, we'll see Southwest Airlines, one of the world's most successful airlines, as to how it goes through its strategic planning and comes up with the particular part of the market that it aims to target. We'll then go into the airline planning model, and we'll see as to how it's affected by the short-term goals, the long-term goals, what's tactical and what's strategical. And we'll start off with how an airline works out what business does it want to be in and what strategies is it going to adopt. Then it's going to take a look at what routes do we really want to fly. If it's an airline flying already, then it's going to have certain routes and it may wish to expand or contract those. But once we know the routes, we can get into what sort of fleet do we want to have. And we'll be talking about that during the course. Once we know the routes and the fleet, we can look at the schedule development, and we'll go into all those aspects of schedule, such as the frequency planning, the timetable, the aircraft assigned, how they'll be rotated so that they end up going into their scheduled maintenance at the right times and not costing the airline extra money. Then we'll take a look at pricing. What price will they charge to make sure they compete? How will they manage their revenue? And revenue management is a very, very big part of airline economics, as we'll see in later lectures. And then what sort of sales and distribution will they have for getting those customers to come in? These are important parts. On the other side, on the tactical side, we'll be looking at things such as crew scheduling, so we don't end up spending too much money having crews staying away from base too long. We'll be looking at airports. Airports now are large economic entities within themselves. And finally, we'll be looking at the operations control. That is, how do we actually move our aircraft around the most efficient way possible? And we'll be taking a look at some of the technologies there, such as air traffic control, how airports can use technology to get the best utilisation of resources, and how, of course, other parts that interface with airlines also provide those services to them. So the airline planning model is something that we will be building upon right throughout the course. But early in the course, we'll be going into those areas of strategic planning so the airline defines exactly what business it wants to be in and how it's going to go about that. The final thought for anyone who's actually going to be working in the airline industry, and this was summed up very well by Nigel Pearcey, a very, very famed author in Airline Economics, and he said this: the sad truth is that none of us has the right to prosper, in airlines that is, unless we provide the fickle, disloyal but paying customer with what they value most, and we keep on doing that or we pay the consequences. And we'll be looking at airlines right throughout the course, and that saying will be coming over time and time again. Once upon a time, airlines could depend on loyalty of customers to be able to fill their seats. That's not the case anymore. Airlines look at airline economics every minute of every hour of every day throughout the year to make sure that they survive against their competitors. So in summary, we have looked at some of the very basic economic related attributes such as the potential possibilities frontier. We've looked at some of the simple economic terms such as the margin, but we'll be expanding upon that in the full lecture. We've looked at how strategic planning integrates with airline planning, and we've spoken about the economic factors that impact upon airline strategy formulation. And we've looked at some of those economic features that are unique to airline planning principles. And as I said, the one thing that comes over is, compared to any other organisation, airlines, for what they invest, make a very, very small margin every time they fly a passenger. And this message will be coming over right throughout the course. And yet we'll see airlines do this every day, and they not only prosper, but they grow and they expand. That's what we'll be studying throughout the course. Thank you very much.